Good afternoon, everyone. Congressman Malinowski, great to see you again, and thank you, as always, for your support of the 2020 census. I'm happy to still report that Congressional District 7 is #1 in the state of New Jersey. So clearly, your efforts and the efforts of the community leaders throughout Congressional District 7 are doing the job. It's fantastic. 73.8% of the households in the congressman's district have self-responded to the census, meaning they've gone online, they've called it in over one of our toll-free telephone numbers, or they filled it out on paper and returned it, which is absolutely fantastic. Kind of give you how we're doing nationally. We're currently at 61.6% nationally. Again, the percentage of households that have self-responded. In New Jersey, we're at 63.4%. Again, in Congressional District 7, 73.8%, which is truly amazing. In Warren County, we're at 68.6%. In 2010 in Warren County, we were at 70.4%. So we're close to beating that. And given all the challenges we've had with COVID-19, I think this is truly admirable, the work that all of you have done in your community leaders. So I thank you. If you want to go down a little bit lower level, in Alpha, 72.3%. Franklin Township, 67.8%. In Greenwich, 80%. And Harmony, 68.1%. And Phillipsburg, 60.6%. So those just give you an idea of some of the communities in the congressional district and how they're doing. Again, this is not the percentage of the people who've been counted. This is just the number of households that have responded. And that's important to note because we're going to get to 100%. And I'll go over the kind of the schedule of what things look like here shortly. I did want to mention, as a result of the schedule, there have been changes as a result of COVID-19. We have requested statutory relief from the one day that's kind of tied to law, Title 13, which allows us to collect the data. Also states that by December 31st of 2020, we have to provide the apportionment counts, the counts by state, over to the President of the United States. And we've asked for that to be delayed by about 4 months so that we can push the field activities later into the calendar year. And this is important because it wasn't safe to go knocking on doors in May or, to reach out to community members. It wasn't safe for our employees. It's certainly not safe for the public. And what this does, basically, the census, which was scheduled to end at the end of July, has now been extended through the end of October. So every household across the state of New Jersey, across the nation, have until October 31st to fill out their 2020 census. Now, we don't want people to wait that long because regardless of when you fill it out, whether you filled it out in April, whether you fill it out in October, we're asking you who lived at that address as of April 1st, 2020. So the sooner people fill it out, the more accurate the data will be. So our message is, please let's not wait any longer. Let's fill it out if we haven't already. If you want a date to use in your communities to really kind of engage and motivate, use the date August 11th. August 11th is the date that community members who apply for a job, that we hire, they pass a background check, they're going to start knocking on doors of every address in which we have yet to receive a census response starting on August 11th. Between now and then, we want to reduce that workload. We want to increase the self-response rates and reduce the amount of doors that our community members are going to have to knock on. And the way to do that is to get people to either go online at 2020census.gov, click the respond button and fill out your census, call one of our toll-free telephone numbers, or if you have your paper questionnaire, please fill it out and mail it back in. And when we talk about the importance, of representation, ensuring we have our fair share of representation in the U.S. House of Representatives in the state of New Jersey. New Jersey is going to use this data to redistrict after the 2020 census, drawing their voting precincts, their school districts. Businesses will use this data to determine where they want to expand. They want to go to a place where they have a customer base. They want to go to places, open facilities that they have the ability to hire, and the census data provides that information. And lastly, hundreds of billions of dollars of federal funding will be disseminated based upon formulas that use census data over the next 10 years. And they're going to use this 2020 census data, whether it's for things like Medicare or Medicaid. whether it's for things like improving our infrastructure, roads and bridges and tunnels, whether it's for Pell Grants or National School Breakfast and Lunch Programs, Head Start, Title I grants. And I can't think of a better reason than to support our healthcare professionals. When you look at all the funding that comes to our community hospitals, our emergency personnel, based upon formulas that use census data. What an easy way to support your community for the next 10 years. So if you filled it out, thank you so much. We continually need your help. Ask your neighbors, ask those you work with, ask those that you may worship with. Have they filled out the census? And if they haven't, please urge them. Tell them how important it is. Tell them that all the data that we collect is protected under federal law and can never be used against them. The other big date that I'll mention for communities is our group quarters operation and specifically our service-based enumeration. So we will be visiting homeless shelters and soup kitchens and mobile food vans in September. And we'll also be doing our homeless count sometime between September 22nd through 24th. So that's kind of the late breaking news that we just released last week. Lastly, when you ask what are some things that communities can do, I'll share with you some examples. Certainly, we have our data available at 2020census.gov. Every day at 3 o'clock, we update the self-response rates for your communities. It's a cool mapping tool that you can see what are the areas that are really struggling. And we're taking our resources and putting those in those particular areas to understand what are the challenges and to try to drive up that self-response rate. We have materials in print, posters, handouts, half-page pub flyers, things that you can hand out, whether it's at a food distribution site, whether it's at takeout meals, any place where people congregate. We're trying to get the census message across right now, and those are just an example of a few places. We still have partners who are doing calling and text-a-thons. We have a social media toolkit that we'll certainly share with you where you can just cut and paste. We try to make it as easy as possible, but please know that Kevin Derricote, who's on this call, he's one of our partnership specialists, an amazing guy working throughout the state of New Jersey, and our other partnership specialists. We are here to work with you to help improve the count for your community, because we get one opportunity every 10 years to conduct a census, and we have to live with the results, whatever they may be. So let's make sure that our local leaders, that our federal leaders have the best data possible to make some really important decisions over the next 10 years. And how we do that is by filling out the 2020 census. So I'll close with how I started. Congressman, it's always a pleasure to see you again, and I thank you for your leadership and for your voice in talking about how important the 2020 census is to all your communities.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Everybody can be an ambassador in getting the word out to friends, neighbors, church members, co-workers, that this is something that's really easy. We got to do it. And any part of the country, any part of our state that feels like it's not getting the attention it deserves, this is one way to make sure you get the attention that you deserve. And so I'd appreciate everybody's help in getting the word out on the census now. Does anyone have any particular questions for Jeff before we move on to our more general discussion?
Yes, I just had a quick question, and thank you, Congressman, for even hosting these. But for Jeff, do you happen to know offhand the Essex County number in terms of self-responders?
Yeah, give me just a second and I'll pull that up. So Essex County, we're currently at 55.7% self-response rate.
55.7. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Obviously, I like that we're number one, but again, it's not a competition. It's just about making sure everybody is counted and getting us to as close to literally 100% as possible. So, all right, going once, going twice. All right. Well, leave it to us, Jeff. We'll keep working with you. We'll get there.
I know we will. And again, we are here to support you and your community. So please let us know how we can do that. Thanks again.
Thank you so much. All righty. I'm sure I'll see you again. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, let's begin our more general discussion about what's going on. I don't want to take up too much time because I want to get to your questions. There's obviously a lot going on in the country right now, too much to cover in the short time that we have. I'm very busy, and Congress is very busy right now on a few issues, so let me just hit those highlights. I'm going back down to DC on Wednesday, actually. We are going to vote this week on the Justice and Policing Act, I think, very significant piece of legislation in response to the murder of George Floyd in Minnesota and the much longer term issues that just reminded us of, long unaddressed, soon to be addressed, I'm fairly confident. And we can talk about the specifics of that bill and what should be done. But I think the important thing for me to stress right now is that I feel like this is a moment when we can actually get something done on this issue, because I hear from not just Democrats, but Republicans, a recognition that there are systemic problems in policing in our country that are undermining confidence between law enforcement and the communities that law enforcement is sworn to protect. And it is in everybody's interest, civilians as well as police officers, that we fix that problem. And there's some common ground even on the solution, although not 100% that would not be possible, but enough common ground that I think we should be able to not just pass a bill in the House, but sit down with the Senate where there's a similar bill being introduced, not as ambitious as ours, not as good as ours, I think, but that hits on some of the same themes. I think there is a prospect here that we will be able to send something to the president, and then with a lot of pressure, get him to sign it and really be able to do something that helps. So that's number one. That's the most immediate thing. My biggest priority remains trying to get the HEROES Act taken up by the U.S. Senate. As everybody on this call knows, we were hit so hard in New Jersey, and we have made so much progress in recovering from the COVID-19 crisis. We were the hardest hit state per person, per capita in the country. We are now, by some measures, doing the best in our recovery, based on the rate of transmission, based on the percentage of people being tested who are testing positive, based on just the number of new cases coming up every single day. We've gotten our data to where it needs to be to justify a careful, gradual reopening of the state. And you all know we're hitting a lot of milestones over the next couple of weeks, including shopping malls reopening next week. All of that justified by the hard work, by the sacrifice all of us made in the last 2 or 3 months. But we were hard hit. And among other things, the economic hit that we took, that we chose to take to save lives, means a lot less revenue coming in to our state government, as well as to our county and local governments. And if we don't get some relief from the federal government, we are looking in New Jersey at the state level and at the local level at either major cutbacks in services that all of us depend on, including first responders and healthcare and schools, things that will affect your life and mine, or, God forbid, we increase property taxes yet again to make up for the shortfall. So, as I think many of you know, the HEROES Act, which I was a leader in trying to get passed, particularly this provision in the House, provides very significant relief to our state governments as well as to our county and municipal governments. Every town in Warren County, every town in New Jersey will get something out of the HEROES Act. So we're going to get something, in my view. Mitch McConnell in the Senate has said there will be another coronavirus bill. He thinks only one more, but one more for now, I will take, because what we have told him is it's got to include relief for our state and local governments. So that remains priority one for me as far as New Jersey. We are also going to be moving ahead very soon with a major infrastructure bill in the House of Representatives. We have introduced it. It's got a lot of stuff that I worked on, including money that will enable us, that will help us to get real work started on the Gateway Tunnel project. We were just, we over the last couple of months, we have managed to secure funding for the first stage of that project, the Portal Bridge, this old decrepit rail bridge that is the source right now of a lot of the delays on New Jersey Transit. And we're still fighting for money for the tunnel itself. But you will see in this infrastructure bill a lot of resources that we're going to be able to draw on for those projects, and a lot of provisions designed to make it much harder for the Trump administration to hold up money to New Jersey for political reasons, as they have been doing for the last 3 years. And on top of that, that's the big project, the tunnel and those bridges, but just a lot of resources to help communities across this country with roads and bridges and ports and airports and railway crossings and all kinds of stuff that, again, is going to affect our lives personally. So that's some of the big stuff that we're working on in Congress right now. Look, I know this is a very fraught moment in our country's politics. It feels like we're very, very divided. Many of us on this call have talked about these problems many times over the last couple of years, and they are very, very real. And our country has taken a lot of hits in the last couple of years. Most recently, this pandemic that has claimed more than 100,000 lives. I think many of them unnecessarily. But I do feel that there is room to be optimistic about our country's future. I think most Americans are pretty united on these issues. We were united in our response to COVID-19. We're amazingly, I think almost surprisingly united in our response to what happened with Mr. Floyd in Minnesota. And I think whether we're Republicans, Democrats, whatever our views about specific policy issues, I think we're pretty united in saying that it's time to tone down this drama in Washington. It's time to have leaders who focus on speaking truthfully and governing responsibly, putting the interests of the country ahead of their own whims, ahead of their own selfish political needs. There's been way too much of that in the leadership of our country for the last 3 years, and I think most Americans are eagerly waiting for a different approach to leadership. So with that, I am eager to hear your thoughts, your comments, and to answer any questions that you might have for me. Thank you very, very much, as always. DeAndre?
Yes, thank you.
Are you there? Okay.
Yes, just a reminder for everyone on the call, if you would like to ask a question at any point, please just use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. Please include your name and the town you're from. Tom, your first question, what is being done to protect the November election?
I wish that wasn't a good question, but it's a good question because there's a lot of reason for worry right now. We need to protect our November election from, number one, foreign interference. And I have been focused on that since I got into Congress. We've passed legislation in the House addressing that issue. We provided a lot of money to the states to harden their election systems against hackers, against anybody who might maliciously try to mess with the process or with the results. We also need to protect the elections against a virus, against this pandemic, because if we're in a situation in November, anything like what we have been through, and we likely will in some states across the country, the only safe way for a lot of people to vote will be to vote from home, to vote by mail, as we are doing for the primary election in New Jersey coming up in July. And in some states, that's actually going to take changing the rules to allow everybody to do that, and hopefully to do what we've done in New Jersey, which is to actually mail people their ballots to their homes to make it really, really easy. And it's going to take some resources because, you're just going to need to print a lot more of those mail-in ballots. You're going to need to figure out a way to count a lot more than you've ever counted before. We're going to need secure drop boxes so that we're not completely overwhelming the post office and so on. So in the HEROES Act, we provide the resources for the states to do all of those things. We also included a mandate. We tell the states that you have to allow everybody to vote by mail without having any particular excuse or reason that they need to cite. So that all makes perfect sense to anybody who has seen what happened in the Wisconsin primary, which people were lining up for hours, risking really their lives to be able to exercise their constitutional right to vote. And then it happened again in Georgia in their primary. Unbelievable to see these scenes in the United States of America. No one should have to choose between their right to life and their right to vote. And yet this has become politicized. This has become controversial. Just today, I think President Trump tweeted out again that voting by mail is corrupt, that voting by mail is going to destroy the legitimacy of the November election. This is ridiculous. The president and his family vote by mail. Our military votes by mail. We have whole states in this country where everybody has voted by mail for many years. Utah, Washington, Oregon, Colorado. He knows this perfectly well. I think what he is trying to do is to set up an argument, if he loses in November, that it was illegitimate, which I find very, very scary. Because one thing we have done well in America through our generations, our centuries of democracy, is to convince everybody to have confidence in our elections, win or lose, like it or not. We accept the results. And I'm really worried that this president, should he lose the election, will not respect that tradition, and that he's trying to set up an argument for that right now. We just have to argue again and again and again. Voting by mail is safe, secure. In fact, it's more secure than a lot of alternatives. And nobody should be forced to stand in line for hours, risking infection, risking potentially death, to exercise their constitutional rights in our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. As I said, we will switch between live questions and questions previously submitted. So if we do go to live questions, when we call on you, just please unmute your mic and you can go ahead with your question. Our first question, I don't want to mispronounce your name, but our first question comes from Rongo.
No, that's actually Leslie. For some reason, it came on as a screen name as Rongo. I don't know what that's all about.
It's okay.
But,
it's a cool family name.
So my question is, I read an article this morning from Intelligencer, I think it's out of Massachusetts, regarding the mail-in ballots and what nasty tricks they're going to be trying. But most of all, that they're thinking that just before November, they're going to start decreasing funds to the post office. So that will upset the whole flow of mail that's going to be going out. and create a huge disruption in the election process.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about what's being done to counteract that? And also, my question is, can they actually do this to the post office?
One of the look, I don't want to scare you because I'm
terrified.
I am
actually.
generally more optimistic than most. I have a lot of faith in the American people. I have a lot of faith in common sense, pragmatism, and decency of the American people. But we have been reminded in the last couple of years of something that has always been true, and that is that you can get away with anything that people allow you to get away with in life, in government. There are a lot of things that past administrations, past presidents have not done, not because there is a clear legal prohibition, but just because they are not done. Because we have norms, we have principles that everybody just kind of agrees to respect. And, it sort of seems right now as if all of that is being thrown out and anything goes. The firing of the U.S. attorney, for example, in Manhattan. I mean, I can't think of an administration that would have been that brazen, removing 5 months before an election somebody who is conducting sensitive investigations involving the president. But I mean, I guess, yes, he has that power. Can they try to hold up money for the post office thing? They can try. But nothing like that can be done in secret. Anything like that would almost certainly be reported very, very quickly. And that then gives the good people of this country, the good people who are civil servants working within our government, members of Congress, including, I think, an increasing number of Republicans who are not going to tolerate crossing those lines, gives us a chance to push back. And so, look, what I expect is a lot of shenanigans. I expect a lot of anxiety, a lot of need for vigilance. But at the end of the day, the American people are not going to allow somebody to steal their right to vote. Look at what happened. I mentioned Wisconsin and Georgia as negative examples because we don't ever want to see that kind of thing happening in America. But they are also, in one important respect, very heartening examples because despite everything that was thrown at the people of Wisconsin and Georgia, turnout went up, not down. I don't want anyone to have to go through that, but those folks said, if we have to do it, we'll do it because voting is sacred, and especially this year, so much is at stake. We're not going to let anybody stop us. So that's just got to be the attitude that we take. And if we win, we will have a chance to pass bills like H.R. 1, which I'm so proud of, dealing with partisan gerrymandering and voter suppression and all the dark money in our politics. But we're going to have to win at least one election to have a chance to fix our elections. And that victory will come from our determination to do the right thing. And I say that not as a Democrat, and by our, I mean anybody who wants honest elections and honest representation of the country, Republican or Democrat.
I just have one more thing I want to ask you with respect to Bill Barr, and that is that I understand that he is being asked to come and testify in Congress.
He has been asked.
Do you think he's going to?
Well,
he has been asked, but he hasn't responded. What do you think the odds are that he's going to do that?
Can
he get away with doing that?
Well, again, the only check in our constitutional system against defiance of Congress, disdain for the law, abuse of power, the only real check, apart from electing a different person to be president, is impeachment. And that's not going to happen 5 months before the election. We're at a point where the American people have to give their verdict. And that verdict is a mighty form of accountability. and we'll see what the American people decide. I
So,
don't.
So
Yeah.
after the election, let's pray that Joe Biden gets into office. What is going to be the accountability for all of these people, these corrupt people?
Well, so here,
What
I'll
will
tell you
start to happen?
We don't know what will happen. First of all, we don't know who's going to win. But
Right, well, possibly.
I'll tell you my view is we should not be fighting fire with fire. We've had a president who goes around saying, lock him up, lock her up.
Right.
And that in and of itself is a violation of a very important principle, which is that elected officials in our country are not supposed to talk about who should be convicted of crimes. They should not be using their voice, their platform, to encourage anybody's prosecution. I would never do that. What the president's job is, and the next president's job will be, is to appoint good, honest, respectable people to the Justice Department and to tell them, you uphold the rule of law. Help us keep a country in which no one is above the law. And I will trust you to use your judgment as to the best way to do that. And I will not interfere. I'm not going to tell you, go out and prosecute all these people from the old administration because they're bad and we want to, but I will also not tell you not to do that, right? Mm-hmm. Hire good, honest prosecutors, non-political people, follow the facts, follow the law. That's what we should do. And I don't want to, and therefore I don't want to predict what I think the outcome of that will be, because I think that's inappropriate. I just want to restore the rule of law in America. And I will say it should apply to everybody, no matter their status, their power in the last administration. I will go that far.
Good.
Thanks.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Gina Marie. Gina Marie, can you hear us?
Hold on.
There we go.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yes. Hi. Good morning.
Morning.
I forgot my train of thought. I apologize. Mr. Tom, I want to thank you for having these. It's very important for me to learn and listen, so I appreciate that. And I want to tell you, a couple the other week, your office guy, Mr. Ian, he helped me with my question for the help because I be disabled. So I have a couple more concerns, which I think be overlaps.
Okay.
One is the lady that asked about the mail-in votes. I did my primary because I registers, and I had some questions about it, but the person said that it's not too worries about get right because it just be the primaries. But my thing is with the virus, a lot of programs still be closed. Mm-hmm. And some programs are not available no more. And they said they're not sure with state funding if they're going to come back. But I know you're on the federal level, so I'll go back to that. So my concern is because I do have the brain injuries, I rely on some of these programs and people to help me understand. Mm-hmm. So I forgot what I was going to say.
Well, you're worried if they're going to continue.
Yeah, I was trying to read what I put in the chat, but I can't find what I want to say. I'm sorry. But my thing, I went to the store the other week, or was it this week? I don't know. And I still have great concern because there is mask mandatory in our state because there's a lot of people that I saw know the mask, and they seem to think just because you have some kind of cloth over face, because they say the N95 is still in short demand, and a lot of these people, I know I not have N95, they not respect the 6 feet. So that's still a concern about how is that going to get us moving forwards, because I get daily emails from the NJTV PBS that shows like the new cases are creeping up it went from like 100, 200, now it's 500 new positives, but we're not passing away as high, so we're not as concerned. But that raises flags for someone like me that's high risk.
So we are doing much better in New Jersey.
Yeah.
But other states are not doing as well because they weren't as responsible. There were states that opened up too quickly. There were states that never really took this as seriously as they should have. And that could affect us because we can't build a giant wall around New Jersey and keep people out. People travel across America. And so, I am worried, even though we're doing very well in New Jersey now, I am worried that this could come roaring back in our state if we are not careful. And so everybody should be wearing a mask. Absolutely. And they are supposed to if they're in a store. That's a rule. It doesn't have to be an N95 mask. It can be a cloth mask. But it's important that that you be wearing it and that everybody around you is wearing it as well. And we need to remind people to do that because it's not for them, it's for us. It's to protect people around them.
So if I work part-time and I not work yet since the March, I got sick and the doctor still has me home and they're like, no, don't go back yet, Jean Marie, so you be high risk, stay home. But I want to start to go back. I only work like 6-9 hours a week, but I'm just worried about the liables of how I stay safe if people disrespect the 6 feet. Like, I don't know how to, like, are we gonna put that into law? Because, I don't believe that this is just gonna fade off into the sunset.
Yeah.
And
where
you're gonna
do you work?
listen to the bad and the ugly theme song.
Gina Marie, can you tell us where you work?
The Home Depot.
At the Home Depot.
Yeah.
And is the management there trying to make sure that everybody wears masks?
I not be there since the governor shut us down.
Yeah.
Because I got sick and the doctors keep me home. But I want to start to try and go back.
You should follow your doctor's advice. But when I've shopped at my Home Depot, everybody is wearing a mask, all the employees and all the customers. So they seem to be following the rules pretty faithfully. And now if your doctor says that you are particularly at risk, of course you should listen to him. But when you do go back to work, I think you can be confident that your employer is going to be taking care of their employees. And if that doesn't happen, then please let us know. Because that's a store many people go to, and if they're not playing by the rules, then lots of people are going to get sick. So do what's right for you, but if you see anything that concerns you, please let us know. And I'm glad we were able to help with that one thing.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Tom. I appreciate everything you and your office do for not just me, but everybody. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Gina Marie.
Thank you, Bo. Our next question comes from Sophia. Sophia, can you hear us?
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, so I know this is a little bit off topic right now, but okay. I know that there are some proposed cuts to the international affairs budget, and I think right now with everything going on, not only domestically with coronavirus, but also internationally, I think it's really important to ensure that we're not cutting this so drastically. And so I just wanted to know where you stood on this issue.
Well, first of all, I'm so glad that you raised that because it's an issue that's very close to my heart. The Trump administration has proposed very big cuts to the international affairs budget every year. They've been in there. And every time the Congress has rejected those cuts. And I'm quite confident that we will reject them again this year. Even when it was Republican control of the House and Senate, those cuts were rejected. So that should give you some confidence. On COVID-19, I do think it's so important for the United States to be a leader in the world on this issue. Traditionally, there's a crisis like this that affects people all around the world. Everybody looks to America because we're the only country that has the muscle and the wealth and just the compassion to do the right thing. And that's not been happening the last couple of months. It seems like the president just wants to develop a vaccine before any other country does and to use it on Americans. And I get it, we have to put Americans first. But we have a not just tradition of compassion, but a self-interest in this crisis in making sure that everybody who needs a vaccine, everybody who needs treatments to get well, gets it, because it's an infectious disease. It doesn't respect borders. It will, if it continues to rage in Brazil or in India or in the Middle East or in Africa, it will come back here to hurt us. And so this has to be done everywhere. Everybody in the world should be vaccinated against COVID-19. And I think America should do our fair share in making sure that wherever that vaccine is developed, that it gets to everybody around the world who needs it. So I have been raising this in the House. I've been speaking to some Republican senators about it as well, who agree. And we're going to try in the budget that we write for next year to include enough money so that the State Department and the U.S. Agency for International Development, working with our allies around the world, can do our share in making sure that everybody who needs treatments and vaccines can get them.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's really good to know. So I appreciate you sharing your stance on that.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Tom, our next question was typed in, so I'll just read it for them. Will the Senate cooperate on the infrastructure bill the House is voting on next week?
I hope so, of course. I think a lot depends on the president's attitude at that point. He has, at various points in the last year, said that he would support a big infrastructure bill as the best way to recover economically from the COVID-19 crisis. So, sometimes it seems as if we're in full agreement on this, but you never know with him. And I think for something this expensive, a lot of the Republican senators will be waiting for at least permission to go ahead from him before they do. If not for that, then I think we'd be fine, because there is bipartisan agreement in the Congress that we need to invest more in our infrastructure, and that this is an opportunity because interest rates right now are basically zero. And what better time to invest in fixing things and building things than when we can actually borrow money at 0% interest. My philosophy is, everyone's talking about reopening America. I want to rebuild America. I want to take advantage of this moment to do that. The country needs it. Certainly New Jersey needs it more than just about any other state. And so I'm hopeful, I'm not certain, but I'm hopeful that there is possible common ground here. We're going to pass a bill. Senate's not going to like every part of it. We're doing a lot in this bill to build transportation in ways that will help us fight climate change, for example. That may not be their priority. It should be, but it may not be. So we're going to have some arguments about that. But there's room for compromise, and if they're willing, if they have the permission from the president to seek that compromise, then we'll get there.
Thank you, Tom. Our next question comes from Lisa in Stewartsville. Lisa, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Lisa.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much for doing this again. So I'm just getting back to what the congressman said regarding whether or not, if Trump does not win the election, that, I am really worried that he and his supporters will not accept a loss. And I think that when I say supporters, not just the politicians and officials, but the electorate. Are the Democrats kind of coming up with a plan about what they should do or what should be done if that happens? If Trump loses the election, does not accept the results, there's conflict of some sort, like, are the Democrats in Congress sort of, planning for that in the event that's what happens?
Well, it can't just be Democrats. That will be a moment when we responsible people in this country have to come together to say that we all swore an oath to the Constitution of the United States. I never swore an oath to the Democratic Party. None of my Republican colleagues, to my knowledge, ever swore an oath to the Republican Party. We believe in what we believe, and we have differences on policy, but the only oath we've ever sworn is to the United States Constitution. And that will be a moment that tests our Constitution. It will not be the first time it's been tested. It probably won't be the last. I think most people are going to rise to that occasion. We had a moment in Washington a couple of weeks ago when the president tried to get active duty US military out on the streets to suppress people's right to protest. And National Guard elements were actually used to help clear the Lafayette Park, in front of the White House so that the president could cross the street for that photo op at the church. And I think it was really interesting. It was a terrible thing, but it was really interesting to me how our military, leadership of the military, and I think rank and file reacted to that. They said, no, you cannot do that. This is not the job of the United States military. We don't get involved in politics. We are here to protect the country, not to protect a president. And I think a lot of institutions in our country, well, they may have to make that point again after November. If you're right, that's what happens. But I think they are prepared to make that point. Our law enforcement institutions, our judiciary, our armed forces. And I think you will see a significant majority in the Congress that just wants to move past this guy, including a lot of Republicans who right now may be afraid to say that's what they think. So I think, we have to be vigilant about this. We have to be very serious about the potential for difficulties. But I do think that our system of government is well suited for that kind of test. And I think the American people are ready to meet.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you both. Our next question comes from Reggie. Reggie, can you hear us?
Yes. I unmuted.
Hey, Reggie. I hear you.
Congressman, 2 weeks ago, Trump made a speech at West Point, and I did not listen to it or read it. I think it was 45 minutes long, but I think the significant thing that come out of that was he said he's going to end our two endless wars, the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. Do you know, have you heard anything about the status of and I assume it would be the combat troops, maybe it'd be combat troops and non-combat troops, but do you know what the status of that is? Any word that Trump will try to begin or have all combat troops removed before November 3rd?
I don't know. I know that he has been pushing to withdraw from everywhere, not just from those two zones of hostility. I'm particularly concerned right now. I think most Americans would rather not be in Afghanistan forever, and I get that. But what really concerned me was his decision, again, against the advice of all of his remaining competent national security advisors and our military to withdraw troops from Germany, where they have been since World War II as part of our NATO alliance with Germany, with other countries in Europe. They're not there for combat. They're not fighting. They're living in bases. They're living in that community, and it number one signifies our commitment to defend and be defended by our European allies in case of a conflict. It sends a very powerful signal to the Russians, to Putin, that there are lines they cannot cross in Europe, and in so doing, it saves us from a war. It prevents a war. And those bases are incredibly important to our military in that they are a staging off point, a middle point for troops that may be serving further afield for refueling aircraft. If one of our troops is wounded in a war zone, we have hospital facilities in Germany where they are treated. It enables us to have global reach should that become necessary. And he basically decided, no, we're pulling a whole bunch of them out. He didn't consult with any of our allies. He didn't consult with the Congress because he just wants out of everywhere. He wants out of South Korea. He wants out of Japan, even as he pretends, and I emphasize the word pretends, to be tough on China. The Chinese Communist Party is delighted to hear that we are trying to pull our troops out of Asia, South Korea, and Japan. So that's what concerns me. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan have been very controversial. We should never have been in Iraq, in my view, to begin with. Afghanistan, I supported, and I still think we have interests there. But that's, reasonable people can disagree about all of that stuff. What we should agree on is that our strength in the world and our safety, our security at home depend on having good allies who stand by us because they believe we will stand by them. And that's what is at risk today.
Thank you both. Our next question, I will throw it back over to Leslie to ask her question. 1 second. Leslie, you're still mute. There you go.
Okay, sorry. First off, I wanted to say thank you. I didn't say that before to you, Tom, for doing this. It's really great, very informative. And secondly, there was a little blurb about North Korea's nuke threat that I saw yesterday. Something about being directed towards the United States. I'm thinking that it's about chemical warfare, but I'm not really sure. Do you know anything about that? And what's being done to prevent it? Hello?
Yeah, you should know that the North Koreans every other Tuesday threaten to drown the world in a sea of fire, to obliterate all their enemies with cosmic death rays. And I don't want to trivialize the importance of dealing with North Korea, which has nuclear weapons and a very nasty government, and we have troops in South Korea, as I was just discussing, and we should care about their safety and the safety of our South Korean allies. But I wouldn't get too worked up about reports that you may see about some threat that they issue, because that's just the way they talk. And we are still in South Korea. We still have that deterrent. I think the president tried some diplomacy with Kim Jong-un, which was not very well conceived. I'm being diplomatic. And that's pretty much over right now, because it was just kind of a bromance with a dictator. There was not much substance behind it. And so we are where we have been, a dangerous situation, but not more dangerous than it was a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
Right.
Thanks.
Well, that's good to know.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tom, that's our last question. So I will turn it back over to you for closing remarks.
Great. Thank you so much. Look, as always, I really enjoy spending time with everybody. I love the diversity of questions and concerns that you raise. Everything from our local needs here in New Jersey and making sure that we're safe and protected to issues arising all around the world. And I wish every conversation about governing our country were as serious and as thoughtful and as responsible as the conversations that I have with my constituents all of the time. We're all reasonable people. We want what's best for our neighbors, our communities, our country, and the world. And I think if this is how politics ran in America, we'd be okay. And I think we are going to be okay by the exercise of our civic responsibilities every single day, and of course on election day above all. So thank you all so much as always, and look forward to the next conversation. Bye-bye.